The sound of laughter echoed from behind the closed bedroom door. It wasn't mine. And it sure as hell wasn't a sound I expected to hear in my own damn house at 11:47 p.m. when my wife was supposed to be asleep. My heart pounded as I tightened my grip on the doorknob. This wasn't paranoia. I knew something was off for months. Ellie had been acting different. Distant, always on her phone, dressing up more than usual, suddenly too busy for me. I had brushed it off at first, convincing myself that she was just stressed. But deep down, I knew better. And now, as I stood there outside my own bedroom, hearing the kind of laughter that no married woman should be sharing with another man, I knew I was about to confirm my worst nightmare. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I slammed the door open with enough force to shake the walls. And there she was, Ellie, my wife of 10 years, the woman I had built a damn empire with, the woman I had sacrificed sleep, blood, and sweat for. She was sprawled across the bed, her red silk robe hanging off her shoulders, her blonde hair a mess, like she had just been having the time of her life. And then there was him, Rick Harrison, her boss, that smug, arrogant bastard who always looked at me like I was beneath him. The same guy she swore she couldn't stand. The same guy she had laughed off when I once, half-jokingly, asked if he had a thing for her. Rick didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. No, he had that cocky smirk on his face, like he had just won something, like he wasn't half-naked in another man's bedroom, about to get his face rearranged. "Jake?" Ellie gasped, pulling the sheets up around her like she hadn't already been exposed. "It's not what it looks like." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Really? Then what the hell does it look like, Ellie?" Rick exhaled and leaned back against my headboard, like he was making himself comfortable. That was all I needed. I lunged. One punch, straight to his jaw. The smirk was gone. He hit the floor hard, groaning like the pathetic excuse for a man he was. I grabbed him by the collar, pulling him up just so I could knock him down again. This time he spat out blood. "Jake, stop!" Ellie shrieked, shoving me back. She dropped to the floor beside him, touching his face like she actually gave a damn. I felt sick. Not just because of the betrayal, not just because of the lies, but because of how easy it was for her to throw it all away, to touch him like that, right in front of me. "You!" I pointed at Rick, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Get the hell out of my house before I do something that'll put me in prison." Rick wiped his mouth and chuckled. "Relax, man. It's not like you didn't see this coming." That was it. I lunged again, but Ellie threw herself between us. "Jake, listen to me," she screamed. This was a mistake." I narrowed my eyes. "A mistake?" "Yes." She grabbed my arm, eyes wide with desperation. "You've been so distant, so focused on work. I was lonely, Jake. And Rick, he was just there for me." I yanked my arm away. "Don't you dare try to make this my fault." Rick groaned as he stumbled to his feet. "This is getting boring. I'll see you at work, babe." He winked at Ellie before heading toward the door. And she didn't stop him. That told me everything I needed to know. Ellie wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't heartbroken. She was just caught. And that was worse than anything else. I stood there, fists clenched, watching as Rick walked out of my house like he owned the damn place. Like he hadn't just ripped my world apart and spit on everything I had built. The door shut behind him with a quiet click, and for a moment, the silence in the room was deafening. Then Ellie let out a dramatic sigh, rubbing her temples like she was the one who had just gone through hell. "Jake, you're overreacting," she muttered, standing up and adjusting her robe, as if covering herself up now would undo what I had just seen. I laughed, actually laughed, a short, humorless sound that made her flinch. Overreacting? I had just walked in on my wife tangled up with another man in our bed, and she had the audacity to act like I was the problem? Are you kidding me? I stepped toward her, shaking my head in disbelief. "I just caught you screwing your boss, Ellie, in my house, and you're telling me I'm overreacting." She crossed her arms, tilting her chin up like she actually thought she had the upper hand. "Look, I know you're mad, but let's be honest. Our marriage hasn't exactly been great lately. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the explosion brewing inside me. So that justifies this? I gestured toward the bed, the sheets still a mess from what she had done with him. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her damn eyes. You're never around, Jake. You're always working, always busy. And when you are home, you're just there. We don't talk anymore. We don't do anything fun. What did you expect? I stared at her, trying to process the sheer level of bulls **** pouring out of her mouth. So instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix things, you decided to crawl into bed with another man? Her lips parted like she wanted to argue. But for once, she had nothing to say. I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand down my face. How long? Ellie frowned. What? I locked eyes with her. How long has this been going on? She hesitated just for a second. And that second told me everything. Ellie, I growled. How long? She swallowed, then sighed dramatically, like this was exhausting for her. A few months. My stomach twisted. Months? She had been lying to my face for months, sneaking around, sleeping with that smug piece of trash while coming home to me like nothing was wrong. You really are a piece of work? I muttered, shaking my head. Ellie scoffed. Oh, please, don't act like some perfect husband. You put your work before me every single time. Do you even remember the last time you asked me how my day was? The last time you planned something for us? My jaw tightened. Do you remember the last time you acted like you gave a damn about this marriage? She let out a bitter laugh. You think this is just my fault? Like you didn't push me away first. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pushed you away? By working my *** off to build us a life? By making sure you had everything you ever wanted? Her lips curled into a smirk, but there was nothing warm about it. Everything except attention. I let out a harsh breath. You're unbelievable. She shrugged. You're predictable. I knew you'd freak out like this, but honestly, what did you think was going to happen? You ignore your wife long enough, and someone else is going to fill the gap. That was it. The last straw. I stepped back, my heart pounding, but it wasn't from anger anymore. It was from clarity, from realizing in this very moment that the woman standing in front of me wasn't the same woman I married. Maybe she never had been. Get out, I said, my voice eerily calm. Ellie blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, I said. Pack your things and get the hell out of my house. She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. You're not serious. I crossed my arms. Dead serious. Ellie scoffed. You can't just throw me out, Jake. I arched a brow. Watch me. For the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across her face. You're just mad. You'll calm down, and we'll talk like adults. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You made your choice, Ellie. Now you get to live with it. She bit her lip, her mind racing for an excuse, a way out, but I wasn't giving her one. You know what? She snapped after a moment. Fine. Maybe I don't need to be here. Maybe Rick was right about you. I stiffened. What did you just say? She smirked. He said you were weak, that you'd never have the guts to do anything about this, that you'd just yell a little, cry about it, then forgive me because you're too afraid to be alone. My vision blurred with red, not because she said it, but because I had almost believed it. But Rick was wrong. I wasn't weak. I wasn't afraid. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her get away with this. Ellie smirked, thinking she had won. That was the worst part. She actually believed she still had control over me, that I was just going to stand there and take it. But she had no idea who she was dealing with anymore. I stepped forward, closing the gap between us until she had to tilt her chin up to meet my eyes. The confidence in her expression wavered, just a flicker, but I caught it. You really think I'm going to beg you to stay? I said, my voice low and even. Ellie crossed her arms, still playing the game, still convinced she had the upper hand. I think you don't have the guts to be alone, Jake. You're so used to me taking care of everything, running this house, being the perfect little wife for your perfect little life. You're lost without me, and we both know it. I laughed, A real laugh this time. Sharp, cutting. That's funny, I said, shaking my head. You actually think you matter to me anymore? Her smirk faltered. Oh, don't act like some tough guy now, Jake. You were just whining about betrayal 5 minutes ago. You're not built for this. I leaned in, my voice dropping lower. You were my wife, Ellie. I loved you. I gave you everything. And you threw it all away for a loser like Rick. She scoffed, but she couldn't quite hold my stare. You call him a loser, but he actually listens to me. He makes me feel wanted. Something you haven't done in years. I exhaled slowly, clenching my jaw. Rick's a parasite. He latched onto you because he saw an easy target. And you? You were so desperate for attention that you let him. Ellie's face twisted with anger. Screw you, Jake. You don't know anything about me. That's the thing, I said. I thought I did. I thought you were my partner. My person. But you were just as selfish. Lying. I stopped myself, shaking my head. You're not worth the words. Her mouth opened, ready to fire back. But before she could, I turned away and grabbed my phone. What are you doing? She demanded. Calling a lawyer. That wiped the smirk off her face. Wait, Jake, come on. I didn't respond. I scrolled through my contacts, found the number I needed, and hit call. Ellie rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Jake, stop. We don't have to do this right now. I yanked my arm free. No, Ellie. You don't get to decide that anymore. Her face paled for the first time that night. You're serious. Dead serious. She hesitated, searching for something to say. Some way to manipulate the situation like she always did. Jake, please. Just, let's talk first. I stared at her. The nerve of this woman. The absolute audacity. Talk, I echoed. Now you want to talk? After months of sneaking around behind my back? After laughing at me with that scumbag? Her throat bobbed. I didn't mean any of that, Jake. I was just... Save it. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Jake, we can fix this. I shook my head, feeling nothing but disgust. No, Ellie, you can't fix something you set on fire. She stared at me, her confidence shattered, her manipulations failing. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. Good. I turned back to my phone as the call connected. Hey, Bill. It's Jake. Yeah, I need to start the divorce process. Ellie let out a sharp breath, covering her mouth with her hand. I walked out of the bedroom, leaving her standing there in the mess she had created. The sound of her shallow breathing, the tension in the air, the reality crashing down on her. It was all her own doing. I had spent years building a life with this woman, years believing we were in this together. But now all I saw when I looked at her was a stranger, a liar, a cheat, and I was done with her. Ellie followed me out of the bedroom, her voice shrill and desperate now. Jake, wait. You don't have to do this. I ignored her, walking straight to my office. I needed space, but more than that, I needed control. She had dictated the terms of this marriage for too long, played her little mind games, twisted things to make herself the victim. Not anymore. She grabbed my arm again just as I reached my desk. Please, let's just talk. We don't have to rush into. I turned so fast she took a step back. Rush? You think I'm rushing? How long were you seeing Rick, Ellie? 3 months? 6? A year? Her lips parted, but no words came out. That's what I thought. I shook my head. I spent years building a life for us, and you threw it away. The second you decided to cheat, you lost the right to have a say in what happens next. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't buy them for a second. Ellie didn't cry because she felt guilty. She cried because she was losing. You're really doing this? She whispered. You're really throwing everything away over one mistake? I barked out a laugh. One mistake? That's rich. You didn't trip and fall into Rick's bed. Ellie, you made a choice. Over and over again. She clenched her jaw, her tears drying up instantly. There it was, the real Ellie. The one who only cared when things didn't go her way. So that's it? She snapped. You're just going to throw me out like garbage? I tilted my head, considering her words. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Because that's exactly how you treated me. Isn't it? Like I was disposable. That's not fair, she said, shaking her head. I loved you, Jake. I still love you. I scoffed. You don't destroy someone you love. She crossed her arms, shifting tactics again. And what about everything I did for you, huh? All those years I supported you, stood by you, believed in you when no one else did. You mean the years where you smiled to my face and lied behind my back? I countered. The years where you pretended to be my partner while sneaking around like a coward? Her eyes flashed with anger. You know what? Screw you, Jake. You act like you were some perfect husband. Like you didn't work late every night, like you didn't put the business ahead of me, like you didn't make me feel invisible. I narrowed my eyes. Oh, I'm sorry. I was too busy building a future for us. Too busy making sure you never had to worry about money, that we had a life worth living. And how did you thank me? By crawling into bed with your boss. Her face twisted, and for the first time, she had nothing to say. I turned back to my desk, opening my laptop. I'll have the lawyer draft the papers. You'll be hearing from him soon. Ellie stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, her fingers curled into fists. Then, just as I started typing, she spoke again, her voice cold and sharp. You'll regret this, Jake. I glanced up at her, my lips curling into a smirk. No, Ellie. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for what you were sooner. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The house was finally quiet, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. The silence in the house was suffocating, but I welcomed it. It was better than hearing Ellie's endless lies, her fake apologies, her pathetic attempts to justify what she had done. I sat there for a moment, staring at the computer screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Divorce. It was the only way forward, and I wasn't about to drag my feet like some idiot clinging to false hope. Ellie had made her choice the second she crawled into Rick's bed. Now it was my turn to make mine. I pulled up my lawyer's contact information and started typing an email. Short, direct, no emotion. Just the facts. I wanted this over with as soon as possible. Before I could hit send, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Hello. A low chuckle came through the line. Jake Morrison. Man of the hour. My grip on the phone tightened. I knew that voice. Rick. Surprised. He sounded relaxed, almost amused. Thought I'd reach out. Clear the air. I let out a sharp breath, my free hand balling into a fist. You really have some nerve calling me. Rick laughed again, completely unfazed. Oh, come on, Jake. No hard feelings, right? I mean, these things happen. Marriage is complicated. You should have seen the signs. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. You're a real piece of work. You know that? He sighed dramatically. Look, I just wanted to say there's no reason for this to get messy. You're a smart guy. You built a great business. No need to let emotions ruin everything. I leaned forward, voice dropping to a dangerous level. You're giving me advice now? After sleeping with my wife. Ex-wife, he corrected. Or soon-to-be, at least. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You think this is funny? You think you get to call me and gloat? Oh, I'm not gloating, he said smoothly. I'm just making sure you're thinking clearly. Because, let's be honest, Jake, you're a little out of your depth here. I forced myself to take a slow breath. Is that right? Rick chuckled again. You were always a hard worker. I'll give you that. But me? I know how to play the game. And trust me, Ellie? She's not walking away from this empty-handed. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Divorce isn't just about signing papers, he said. It's about negotiations, leverage. And Ellie? She's got plenty. You think you're just going to kick her out and keep everything you built? Not how it works, buddy. I ran a hand through my hair, my pulse pounding. I had worked for everything I had, every damn cent. And now this smug son of a bitch was acting like Ellie could just waltz away with half of it? Rick must have sensed my anger because he laughed again. Relax, Jake. I'm just giving you a heads up. Maybe you should sit down with Ellie, talk it through. Who knows? Maybe you two can come to an understanding. Yeah, I muttered. Here's my understanding. Stay the hell out of my life. I hung up before he could say another word, tossing the phone onto the desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Ellie wasn't just a cheater. She was a liar, a manipulator, and now a parasite looking to leech off everything I had worked for. And Rick? He wasn't just some guy who had an affair with my wife. He was a snake, slithering into my life, thinking he could take what wasn't his. I wasn't going to let that happen. I sat back down, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just about getting rid of Ellie anymore. This was about making sure she didn't take me for a fool one last time. If she thought she was walking away from this with anything but regret, she was dead wrong. I picked up my phone again and dialed my lawyer. Mike, I said when he picked up, I need you to make sure my wife walks away from this with nothing. Jake leaned back in his office chair, the glow of his computer screen reflecting in his cold, calculating eyes. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos, text messages, even voice recordings of Ellie and Rick laughing at his expense. The humiliation he felt was beyond words, but he wasn't going to wallow in it. No, he was going to turn it into fuel. Ellie had mocked him, disrespected him, and thrown away everything they had built together for a cheap, pathetic affair with a sleazy, second-rate executive. She thought she was untouchable. That was her biggest mistake. The first step was securing his business. Morrison Warehouses was his empire, and he'd be damned if Ellie would get a single piece of it. He met with his lawyers that same evening, laying out everything he had collected. The divorce would be brutal for Ellie. Every asset, every account, every luxury she had grown accustomed to would be stripped from her. And Rick? That idiot had no idea what was coming. Jake knew the company's biggest investors personally. He set up a private meeting with them and laid out the truth. Rick had been screwing his wife, using company funds to take her on vacations and buying her expensive gifts. He handed over the evidence, showing just how reckless and unprofessional Rick had been. The investors were livid. A scandal like this would bring down the company's reputation, and they wanted Rick gone immediately. Jake didn't even have to lift a finger. Corporate sharks would handle that for him. The next phase of his revenge needed to be personal. Ellie had disrespected him not just in private but in front of their friends, behind his back, in places where he should have been safe. She deserved to feel that same humiliation. He hired a private investigator to dig deeper, and what he found made Jake laugh out loud. Rick wasn't just a cheater, he was in massive debt, using company resources to cover his losses. If Ellie thought she was upgrading, she was in for the shock of her life. Jake planned everything for their anniversary. He invited family, friends, and business associates to a luxurious banquet hall, presenting it as a celebration of love and success. Ellie, oblivious to what was coming, arrived dressed in a designer gown, smiling like she had won some grand prize. She played the loving wife in public, draping her arm around Jake as if nothing had changed. Disgusting. As the dinner progressed, Jake took the stage, microphone in hand. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke about their years together, and then, with a cruel smile, he clicked the remote in his hand. The massive projector behind him lit up. The first image was of Ellie and Rick at a hotel, laughing, embracing. The audience gasped. Then came the text messages, the voice recordings, the cruel words Ellie had spoken about Jake. The room fell silent. Ellie's face drained of color. Rick, sitting in the back, froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Ellie, Jake said, his voice calm and deadly, you always loved the spotlight. Enjoy it. Ellie stammered, looking around the room, eyes darting from one horrified face to another. People whispered. Some shook their heads in disgust. Her parents, sitting near the front, looked mortified. This is a joke, she finally spat, standing up. You're making a fool of yourself, Jake. This is pathetic. No, Ellie, Jake said, stepping down from the stage and walking toward her. What's pathetic is you throwing away a loyal husband for a man who can't even keep his job. Right on cue, one of the investors in the room stood up. "Rick," he said coldly, "don't bother coming into work tomorrow. You're fired." Rick looked like he had been punched in the gut. He shot up from his seat. This is ridiculous," he stammered. "You can't fire me over." "Oh, we can." The investor cut him off. "And we are." Ellie turned to Rick, panic in her eyes. "Rick, say something. Do something." Rick, the man she had betrayed her husband for, was already backing away, hands up in surrender. "Look, I didn't know he'd do all this," he stammered. I gotta go." And just like that, he bolted. Ellie was left standing there, humiliated in front of everyone she knew. Jake could see it in her eyes, the realization that she had lost everything. The respect of her friends, her social status, her financial security. And worst of all, she had lost the only man who had ever truly cared about her. "You think I'll let you get away with this?" she hissed, stepping closer, voice shaking with rage. Jake smirked. "Ellie, you already did this to yourself." She raised her hand as if to slap him, but Jake caught her wrist midair. "Don't," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're not worth it." He let her go and walked away, leaving her to deal with the destruction she had caused. Jake walked out of that banquet hall feeling lighter than he had in months. The crisp night air hit his face as he loosened his tie, exhaling all the anger, betrayal, and pain that had suffocated him since the moment he found out the truth. Behind him, Ellie was left standing in the wreckage of her own making, alone, humiliated, and with nothing left to hold on to. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Ellie tried everything, crying, screaming, manipulating. She claimed she had been confused, that she never stopped loving him, that Rick had pressured her into it. Lies, all of it. Jake didn't even bother responding. He let his lawyers tear her apart. Every asset she thought she'd get, gone. Every penny she thought she could squeeze out of him, denied. The judge saw right through her sob story. The evidence Jake provided was more than enough to ensure she walked away with next to nothing. Rick, on the other hand, was drowning. Fired, blacklisted in the industry, and with a mountain of debt he couldn't pay off, he had become a nobody overnight. He tried reaching out to Ellie, but she ignored him. The woman who had thrown away her marriage for him wanted nothing to do with him now that he was broke. Karma had done its job. As for Jake, he focused on rebuilding. Not his business, Morrison Warehouses, was stronger than ever. He rebuilt himself. The man he used to be, the trusting, loyal, naive husband, was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Love without respect is worthless. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Months later, he heard from a mutual friend that Ellie had moved into a cheap apartment on the outskirts of town, struggling to keep up with the lifestyle she once took for granted. She had tried dating, but word spread fast. No man of value wanted a woman who had thrown away her marriage for a failed affair. She had gambled everything, and she had lost. Jake, on the other hand, thrived. He traveled, met new people, and finally started living for himself. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't broken. He was free. And that was the best revenge of all.